inaleta mabadiliko na mbinu mpya za uchaguzi yenye wadhifa wa mipaka. Chagua Kenya unayoitaka, usirudie yale makosa.
Welcome. This is the Countdown with IEBC. I'm Johnson Mwakazi. This week we're discussing about the controversial budget proposal by the IEBC. Of course, a lot of concerns have been raised from different quarters. Well, today we are talking to the Daystar University fraternity, just basically looking at the questions that they have and the comments, their views that they have regarding the same. Charles, what is your thought about this whole budget idea?
The budget making process was not participatory. That's why there are all those issues rising from all quarters. Public resources are resources for the citizens, and the citizens need to be involved on how those resources will be allocated and how they'll be spent.
If they could have engaged the people could be with them. We could be moving around the street saying, can you give IEBC the money? Because it's our money. It's not for the parliament. It's not for the treasury. We could support them, but now we don't know even how much they're requesting for civic education, how much they're requesting for. Actually, it's just something that is just within themselves. And I wish maybe tomorrow they'll just buy a space in the Daily Nation, publish the entire budget so that the public can see what is there, and if possible, bring stakeholders on the boardroom and tell them what is really actually they are demanding. And Kenyans will be behind them. The reason why we are not supporting what they are demanding is that we don't know what they are demanding.
Thank you so much for that comment. Another comment here.
First it was 26 billion. Then they scaled it down to 25 billion. That's a huge difference. And if they could do it, if they were given 46 billion at first and told, okay, you needed 46 billion, go ahead and have an election. And then all of a sudden they're told, you won't have 46 billion, we'll give you 17. Then they say, we can do it 25. There is something fishy about the two budgets, and right. I think we should engage more with IEBC as citizens, and also other stakeholders be involved in this process.
Right, so what are your thoughts?
Can they be able to show us how every coin will be used? And as he said, I'm not sure we really need so many vehicles. The ones that were used in 2007 are probably there. Let us educate the people. Let us know what each dime is being used for. And trust you me, every other citizen will be behind them.
IEBC was not born the other day. Of course, generally speaking, conducting the referendum and the by-elections, no one actually raised a finger. Now they're giving us a budget proposal. Shouldn't we just go ahead and say, you know what, absolutely we support you, because this is going to be a totally different ball game compared to 2007. Your thoughts?
The IEBC is correct on this figure. We Kenyans are quick to judge and poke fingers. To carry any credible elections, it surely beats logic that we have to have cash and sufficient fund. As you see, IEBC was set on a platform for change. What happened in 2007 was a result of few funds, and yet these politicians, they're the same players. They are the same players. See, they want to create loopholes that will enable them to get their way back into parliament or whatever post they want.
Okay. Another thought there.
We want fair elections in Kenya. Let's take for an instance Manchester United and Arsenal. If you don't pay those players very well, they will not play the way you want. Take for example Rooney or Van Persie in Arsenal. If you don't pay them very well, they will not score, they will not play very well the way you want. So if we need fair elections, if we want security in Kenya here during the forthcoming elections, let us support the IEBC. The way the chairman for the budget, Mr. Elias Mbau, said there will be no further negotiations. And now they've settled at 25 billion Kenya shillings. So let us pay the IEBC, let us support them, so that if those people in diaspora, if we want them also to vote in a sufficient and enthusiastic way, let us support the IEBC.
Another comment. I mean, if you're not ready to pay the cost, don't expect something good.
They're talking about the credibility of the election. And what is it that has been undermined? If, for example, there are 46 billion and they came to 35 billion, now to 25 billion, what is it that has been left out? Because there is something that was there that has been put in place when they're in 46 billion and they came to 35 billion. What is it that has been left behind that was now that is going to be budgeted for the 25 billion? At the same time, there is something that has been left. That's something that is, they are talking about the credibility of the election. And at the same time, there is something that has been left.
All right. Very quickly to a point there. Yeah, gentlemen. Mm-hmm.
I feel like either IBC is not transparent enough by standing by their initial budget and let the treasury say what they don't see good in that budget. If they have now reached 25, let me believe in my utopian world, believe maybe they will stick by 25 billion so that we get a credible election results.
Right.
Otherwise, this country then will still be held by the hands of the politicians. Mm-hmm. They say today, hii huwezi kula na inakaa hivyo. No, and I am sending a message to them. They choose to listen to the independent commissions or institutions of this country that we trust. Or they start looking at us to know how we can really trust our institutions. And we can fund them. We can even do our fundraising. The IEBC now, we are giving you money. We are holding, we are getting you billions. And they give us credible other than just depending on these guys who never want to open their eyes for the change that is coming.
Okay, let's have your comment.
The government as well as IEBC should negotiate and come at a reasonable price that could be able to facilitate this coming election. And to avoid, and when they're given that amount of money, the ABC should be able to facilitate that election in a very proper manner. So that should be hitches or anything that goes wrong during the elections, there'll not be an excuse of shortage of funds.
Well, it's been a great opportunity talking to the Daystar University fraternity about the budget proposal by the IEBC. Please remember, you can send in your comments and questions to the contacts on your screen. Remember, as always, this is the countdown with IEBC. After engaging the students and lecturers at Daystar University, we are here talking to Ambassador Yusuf Nzibo, a commissioner with the IEBC, to respond to some of those questions and concerns. Shukran sana, Ambassador.
Asante sana.
Nashukuru. Zile pesa ambazo mlikuwa mnazihitaji kabisa hamjapata. Sasa shughuli zenu zitakuwa affected kivipi?
Siwezi kusema kuwa zile senti hatukupata. Kitu tumekubaliana na Ministry of Finance ni kuangalia utumizi wa hizi senti. Na pia kuna zile senti ambazo za marudio za elections za urais. Kwa zile senti watatupa, lakini tusitie katika bajeti yetu. Na pia tumekubaliana vitu ambavyo tunaweza kununua sasa, tuvinunue sasa. Na kama kuna makesi ambayo yanatokea baada ya uchaguzi, tungoje baada ya miaka miwili ndio tutie katika budget. So tumekubaliana na upungufu utakuwa ni kidogo, sio kama vile unavyotangazwa katika magazeti au katika televisheni.
There were concerns that your budget proposal was extravagant. In fact, the House Budget Committee said that 17.5 billion that they were offering was enough to conduct credible elections. What is your take on that?
There's been a lot of public discussions about IEBC budget and why the budget is very high. But I think there's a lot of misinformation. We came up with a budget based on 45,000 polling stations. As you're aware, the Constitution has created its own new challenges. There will be 6 elective positions as opposed to 3 elective positions. And also, if there is no clear winner in the presidential elections, the Constitution provides that within 30 days of holding the national elections, that there should be a rerun between the first 2 candidates. The rerun needs to be held within 30 days. There's a cost to it. We did a mock elections in Malindi and Kajiado. And through that mock elections, our experience was that it takes about 350 people to vote in a polling stations between 6 in the morning, as it's provided in the law, to 5 in the evening. We must also understand that the challenge in Kenya is that all the elections are held on the same day. In countries like the US, Nigeria, South Africa, and elsewhere, including India, different types of elections are held on a different date: the local government, the presidential, and legislative assembly. Ours are all going to be held on one day. Our proposed date is 4th of March next year. Remember, we are moving from a post-election conflict period where there was the Kriegler report that looked at the post-election conflict and did recommend quite a number of reform. And that is why IEC and IEBC were created, and eventually we moved to IEBC. One of the recommendations was that the elections were totally flawed. The quality of and the strength of the one man, one vote was not respected. There was a flaw in the voter register that over 1.2 million dead voters did actually vote, which meant you could vote more than once. And therefore, IEC was given a mandate to carry out reforms, including modern technology, which is also a mandate which has been passed on to IEBC. The other crucial mandate, which the government never used to fund, is voter education. And with the new constitution, the new boundaries, the limitations, it is important that we enhance voter education. We have a very high rate of illiteracy in this country, and it's going to be very challenging for an ordinary Kenyan to cast 6 ballot papers in a day. The average, as far as our research is concerned, person takes about between 8 and 12 minutes, if not more. And therefore, what we did was to look at how many polling stations can we have to allow all Kenyans to exercise their rights. Remember also, for the first time, Kenya in the diaspora will be voting. We have over 47 embassies, consulates, and high commission, where we're supposed to embark on giving the Kenyans their right to vote, to be registered, and to be voted. So there are things that we have to invest because the Constitution has created new opportunities for the first time. And therefore, that's why you find that over 6 billion has been set aside for things like BVR kit, that is the biometric voter registration kit, poll books to verify that you are the one who has been registered, to make sure that people don't vote more than once, and also networks to be able to transmit those results effectively. And then, of course, the ballot boxes that have to be paid for, that will cost around 800 million. Each ballot box costs about 4,000 shillings.
We're talking to Ambassador Yusuf Nzibo about the elections budget. Remember, you can send in your comments and questions to the contacts on your screen. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is the Countdown with IEBC. We're talking to Ambassador Yusuf Nzibo about the elections budget. One question that many people are asking is that now that the budget has been slashed, will that affect the quality and the credibility of the elections?
Through our negotiations, really the difference between what we've been asking for and what Treasury is willing to provide is really a very small margin, maybe between 1.5 and 2 billion, because we have re-engineered, as I said, that budget to provide things that can be procured in the next financial to be procured now, things that can be procured in the next 2 budget cycles to be procured later. But Treasury has assured that they are all committed to a free, fair, and a transparent election. These elections are also going to be challenging because remember what went wrong in 2007, 2008. Why we killed each other was because of the announcement of flawed presidential elections. Kriegler was asked who won the elections, and he couldn't for certain say who had won the elections because there were a lot of flaws. And of course, the chairman of the Electoral Commission, when he was asked, he couldn't give a definite answer. So we don't want to repeat this one. We don't want Kenyans into the street.
Of course, your wealth of experience as far as administrative matters are concerned, comes in handy now that IEBC is faced with this sort of situation. What are some of the creative ways you're set to employ so that you live within your means?
These are historic elections. They're not just by elections or the referendum. For the first time, you're going to have multiple elections on the same day. There are going to be independent candidates. Kenyans in the diaspora are going to vote. We have to spend a lot of money on voter education. Well, we've agreed to cut down on the number of clerks that we're going to use, on the number of vehicles we'll hire. But remember, during elections, that is when people hike cost of transport. But people don't understand that our officers are on the ground from day one. That election is a cycle, is a 5-year cycle. That the officers have to be there to conduct voter education, to engage political parties, independent candidates, to deal with conflict mitigation, peace committees, deal with administration throughout the year. Voter registration now, as far as the Constitution is concerned, is continuous. If you reach the age of 18, you have the right to be registered. So they need to be empowered. If you look at the administration, all of them have vehicles. Now, if we are to rely on vehicles from administration, of course, there's the issue of we don't have fuel. IEBC will have to fuel those vehicles. And who will be prepared to share vehicles when they don't have enough vehicles? And that is why we were saying we wanted to empower our officers. We've now agreed to cut down on the 200 vehicles that we would have given the 290 and go back to hiring. But of course, we get taken for a ransom by providers of transport, especially in areas where transport is limited, where terrain is bad, where you had to hire four-wheel vehicles, like, for example, in North Horr and elsewhere. And therefore, we'll try and negotiate, but also Kenyans need to be patriotic. Last time when we had the referendum, even to laminate a polling paper, ballot paper, we had to pay. Kenyans who we appeal for them to allow us to use electric irons to laminate papers, they demanded money. So we had to pay. So we're saying, Kenyans, let's be patriotic. In other countries, people volunteer to serve the Electoral Commission. It's an honor. But we are far from that. The cost of mistrust in this country is very high and very expensive because people believe in sitting throughout the night on ballot boxes. Even in Sudan, where I'm going to observe the referendum, we used to close and say, now we go for prayers and we go and pray. There's only one person there. We go, in fact, the elections were held over 3 days. There will be only 1 or 2 askaris to man the boxes overnight. We came back, we checked the seals, and we continued. Here, each party and each candidate wants to put its own seal, and yet you don't leave the polling stations.
Of course, engaging students and lecturers at the Daystar University, one thing came out that when you formulated your budget proposal, there was no public participation, and perhaps that's why there was no public support in terms of your budget, as far as your budget is concerned. What would you say about that? Yes, we should have involved people, but you know, in the process of budgeting, you normally don't involve people at that early stage. You negotiate with Treasury. Unfortunately, or fortunately, in these circumstances, we report to the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of Parliament. So we had to go and give them our budget that we were still negotiating with Treasury. And of course, it then became public. And also, the point that came out, and which is not very clear in the media, is that Treasury is insisting on poll stations that were used by ECK when we had, the population was not that big. And also, the ballot boxes, the ballot papers were 3. You only had to cast 3. Now you're casting 6. The number that we are targeting is 18 million. As opposed to 9 or 8 million that ECK had. So if you cost what it costs, just take a ballot box, the one you're using, a robust ballot box which costs 4,000. South Africans use cardboard, which costs 30 to 40. Kenyans are not prepared for that. Ethiopia uses skin. And of course, in countries like India, elections are manned by the civil service. The Electoral Commission is just a small unit for policy purposes. In many countries, the people who do delimitation, voter education, voter registration, and conduct of elections are different. The people that announce elections, including in Senegal, it's the judiciary, not the Electoral Commission. So the costs are shared across.
So if you're trying to compare the cost of elections in Kenya with other countries, you have to really compare likes and likes, and also countries that are going through changes like ourselves.
We also have the challenge of the diaspora voting process. What's your take on that?
We've come up with a policy of the diaspora that we will hold their elections in our embassies and consulate. 47 of them we've provided. We are now engaging the stakeholders in how to provide voter education. As you know, it's expensive. We only provided a budget of around 122 million shillings, which is not enough. Kenyans in the diaspora will vote only for the president for the time being. What we've not agreed is, are we going to register them at the embassy, or are we going to provide mobile registration? Initially, we had said it will be registration at the embassy, voting at the embassy. But we know a country like the US is massive. Flight from Washington to Los Angeles is 6 hours. You know, it's like going to Nairobi to Cape Town. So it's going to be difficult for Kenyans. But we want to start in a modest way. There are about 1.5 million to 3 million Kenyans registered abroad. So we'll have to provide for that. So we will start that registration as soon as issues of the limitations are finished. We will have to talk with our partners, including the government, to look for ways and means to fund that voter education abroad using the media. So there is a challenge there. And of course, if you go to the history of prisoners, Kituo cha Sheria took us, after we had finished registration during the referendum, that we had to register prisoners. It was estimated 50,000 prisoners, but we only managed 3,000 only. That's my fear also in the diaspora. We may be budgeting for 1 million people and only 100,000 turn up to vote. But elections are expensive. Democracy is expensive. That's what Kenyans need to understand.
Thank you so much for joining us here on the Countdown with IEBC. We've been talking about the elections budget with Commissioner Ambassador Yusuf Nzibo. Until next time, I'm Johnson Mwakazi.
Chagua Kenya unayoitaka, usirudie yale makosa.